Awesome. All right. So where we're going to pick up today is on page 89. And we're kicking off the chapter 7. It's working with others. And man, I don't know about you, but like this is an exciting part of the book. Now, to be fair, I probably say that whenever we start a brand new chapter at any point in the book, because I got excited about all of it. But what we're talking about working with others, this is step 12. And just experientially, for me, this is when the program truly came alive. When I started working with others, when I started sponsoring, when I started carrying this message and taking other people through the steps. And what we're going to see, we're going to kick off working with others with some powerful promises. And then where do we find some people? And then how do we help some people? And it's, man, wonderful, wonderful practical directions on how to sponsor others, how to work with others, which is convenient because the chapter is called Working with Others. It'd be real difficult if that direction wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? And welcome everyone that just joined. We're on page 89. And so we're kicking it off. Practical experience shows. And what I want to point out about practical experience, when we talk about practical experience, what that means is this isn't some like scientists in their ivory tower of intellect telling the drunks or the drug addicts or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. Here's what you need to do. No, this is our practical experience. This is what we have done, and this is what we have practically found that works. And it shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking. Immunity. To be immune from is to be safe from. Like if I want that, I talk a lot about permanent, contented sobriety. If I want that permanent, contented sobriety, if I want immunity from a relapse, here's what I need to do. It says, so practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. You got to underline that intensive. I mean, you don't have to. The Big Book study is consensual. Feel free to do what you want. But I always want to emphasize intensive. When I'm working with my sponsees, I always emphasize, if you are not at least a little bit inconvenienced, you don't got enough sponsees. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we can't have hobbies. I'm not saying you can't do windsurfing or crochet. I feel like we had a Big Book study not long ago where I'm like, I don't know how to do hobbies. Ugh, like they're the weirdest ones that I pick from my brain. I'm not saying you can't have hobbies. I'm not saying you can't have a job. I'm not saying you don't spend time with your family. In fact, as we get to some of the later chapters, we're going to see how important some of those things are. But what I know to be true, if I am not at least a little inconvenience with my sponsees, I got to go work with some more people. Because here's the truth. Anyone ever like, listen, I like those of us when we start working with people, we don't really want to do it. We're doing it because our sponsor's making it us, and our sponsor's telling us, Paige, you're going to drink and die if you don't. So go work with others. And it's like, oh, you're nervous and you're afraid you're going to mess them up. You know, they're dying from a hopeless terminal condition, but I'm somehow going to make it worse. You know what I mean? And I'm afraid, and I do that thing where it's like, please don't cancel. Or please cancel, but please don't cancel, because then we have to have a talk about accountability, and I don't want to have that conversation either. You know, that sort of wrestling that we have. But it's if I am not like inconvenienced by it, which is to say, man, I've got to work with others. And the working with others, I always want to emphasize, it is not the codependent putting out fires. You know what I mean? It's not codependent caretaking their life. We're going to see that what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry this message. So if I want permanent contented sobriety, what I need to do is I need to work these 12 steps as a way of life and carry this message to others. Carry this message, help them through these steps as outlined in this book. That's what I've got to do. I got to be a little inconvenient because I don't got a good gauge on, you know, if I'm doing enough. If I'm inconvenienced, heck yeah. All right, so it says, it works when other activities fail. So when nothing else is working, go work with another, go get a sponsee, go get in the book with them, go drag them through their 4-step. They love that. They love big drag through the 4-step. It's their favorite. Some of you are like, oh, it's not. And it says, this is our 12th suggestion. And we talk about suggestions. It is suggested, but I will point out we don't have alternative suggestions. The closest thing to the alternatives is what we talk about at the bottom of page 25, where it's like, go on to the bitter ends or accept spiritual help. So the alternative is the bitter end. So it is suggested, but what happens on the other side? Not great. So it says carry, and this is what I was kind of pointing to, carry this message to other alcoholics, this message, these 12 steps to produce the spiritual awakening. That is what I have to offer. My experience with my illness, my allergy, my obsession, my experience with the spiritual awakening, but my experience with these 12 steps, that's what I have to offer. Nothing else. You know what I mean? That's what I have to offer. And it says, you can help when no one else can. Sometimes when I'm working with sponsees, I like to make this joke. Listen, if you're unsure about anything, you can always just tell people you got some bad advice from a crackhead, which they have a lot of humor with that. I'm the crackhead. That's the if you're wondering. Well, recovered. I'll put that in front of it. But it says you can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. And on page 18, we don't have to go there, but on page 18, it speaks a lot about how people like me, I put up walls, I put up masks. Man, I'm not going to be honest with you about what's going on in my life, especially with my family. I keep them at arm's length. Doctors, professionals, I don't let them close, but family, man. But somebody who has had experience with this illness, when I sit down with somebody who's like, man, I did what you did. I felt what you felt. I went through the allergy just like you. I've experienced the mental obsession. I know what it's like to come to the morning after and say, I'm never going to do it again and do it again. And it's like, man, you know what I'm like. And for them to say, I have a solution, I have a way out. That is a message of depth and weight. The ability to say, yes, me too, I drank that way. Yes, me too, I used that way. Yes, me too, I felt like that. Yes, me too, I experienced that. Man, that it disarms me because I can't argue with that. You know what I mean? I can't say y'all don't know me because you do. You've gone through it just like how I have. And it says, remember, they are very ill. And that's important to understand when we're working with others. Because it's not always easy, right? Got to be convenient. But we're dealing with alcoholics or addicts or compulsive, whatever brings you to this study. They are very ill. And that is ill as in operating from a place of pain. But it can look frustrating for sure. But it's that reminder, even those of us who have this illness, it's important to remember ill. So it says life, and I want to point out these first two paragraphs, they're promises. My home group reads them at the end of the meeting because they are powerful promises. And it says life will take on new meaning. I don't know about you, but for somebody like me, my life didn't have much meaning and purpose, and I felt lost and confused with all of it when I got here. And it says to watch people recover, to see them help others. I get to be a small part of their miracle, taking them through these steps to watch them get to that place where they have recovered. The obsession has been relieved as the result of these 12 steps, and they're sponsoring others. Man, that is the stuff. You know what I mean? I have some friends that talk about that's the God dope. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing that was always missing. That is an incredible feeling to watch somebody not just get well, but these two paragraphs are promises. And they're not how do I phrase this? There are more promises in the 12th step. There are more promises in this chapter. And in fact, there's promises in the later chapters. Absolutely. And these are promises. So the promise of immunity from drinking, the promise that working with others will work when nothing else fails, the promise that my life will take on new meaning, the promise, and we're going to see as it continues on, to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish. And if you guys have been coming to the study, I talk a lot about loneliness. And I talk that loneliness is not separation from people. Loneliness is a sense of separateness from God. And you see, I come here and I'm filled with that sense of loneliness and isolation. And if you're like, what do you mean loneliness? I'll say it again for those that aren't sure. That idea of like, man, I don't know about you, but I felt lonely in a stadium full of other people. I felt lonely in a room of 12 steps. You know what I mean? I felt utterly lonely and alone in the middle of a relationship. And I don't know about you, but I felt lonely and alone in the middle of an act of intimacy. See, loneliness has nothing to do with separation from people, but everything to do with a sense of separateness from God. And I do this big book bounce around on loneliness, where we see that transition that happens as I work these 12 steps and I begin to awaken and watch loneliness vanish from my own life. But now I get to see that miracle happening in the lives of others, where the loneliness in their life begins to vanish, because they're experiencing that sense of connectedness with the God of their own understanding. And it says to see a fellowship grow up about you. It's not, I'm like, listen, nowadays it's easy. We get a Zoom, and I'm so glad you're all here. It truly means the world to me. Like, I'm not even kidding. It means the absolute most that you guys are here. But it's like we get a Zoom into a meeting. The fellowship, it's already there. But the fellowship they're talking about is the fellowship that is created when I work with another person. I take them through these steps and they take others through these steps, that fellowship that happens through that process. Now, this fellowship that we have here, it's awesome. I love you guys, but that's what it's talking about. That profound fellowship that grows up around us, helping others and watching them help others. To have a host of friends. Man, I didn't have many when I got here. You know what I'm saying? And we got people all over the world in this meeting. And here we are, you know what I'm saying? So this is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. This brings us, I don't know about you, but like, this is the joy of my life. Like, this is the stuff, being able to do this. It's the coolest thing. I love it. And like, man, if you would have told me when I got here, Paige, hanging out with a bunch of other drunks or drug addicts, that's gonna be the bright spot of your life. I'd be like, uh-oh. You listen, you guys, you can still do your skydiving or your scuba diving. You can, all the forms of diving, you know what I mean? You can do those. But there is a joy that happens when we connect with each other at this deep level. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, unless you don't want to skydive, you don't, that's also optional. I'm not going to force that on you. Steps, not optional. Skydiving, absolutely not mandatory. Alrighty. So it says, so now what we're transitioning into is like, okay, I've got to work with others. And if I work with others, these are the promises that will come true in my life today. So where do I find these newcomers? Or where do I find these prospective sponsees or people to work with? So it says, perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. I want to contextualize this paragraph. See, this book was published 85 years ago and 5 days ago. You saw me do the math in my head. I know, thank you. That should be impressive, but I used to be a math tutor, and really it's more alarming than anything else how long it took me to do that math. But you know, this book published 85, a little bit, years ago, and its whole purpose was to go and succinctly carry the message. And imagine I get a copy of this book in Calgary, Alberta, or you know, in maybe a small town in Ohio. Or I get or in Sweden or the UK, and I get a copy of this book, and there's no Zoom, there's no meetings, there's no intergroup, there's just me and this book. Where am I going to find these people to work with? And so that is the context of this paragraph. And what I want to point out is in 2024, I gotta look at the calendar. I'm like, what year is it? But in 2024, you know what I can do? Go to a meeting. And like, it's pretty easy, because it's like, perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who wish to recover. Well, a meeting is probably a good place to find some people who are in theory and hopefully wanting to get well, you know? And that's the thing, is meetings are not a solution. Like, I cannot stay sober based on the meetings that I make. But I do need to go to meetings. I need to go to meetings, because where else am I going to find people? And it is nice to have, man, these are nice. They're lovely. This is fun. I mean, that's subjective. You don't have to find it fun. I find it fun. But you know what I mean? And so in 2024, I can go to an in-person meeting. I can go to a Zoom meeting. There's a bunch of places that we can go to find people, but let's read through and talk about this a bit more. So perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. We got some. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. So that's, if we kind of look at that, like as an individual, I don't have to make those connections. But those are the connections that various 12-step groups do have to make. Public information committees. Yes, welcome. We're on page 889. Public information committees or go out and make connections with these, there's the CPC committees, cooperation with the professional community. There's hospitals and institutions where connections are made with detoxes, rehabs, hospitals, psych wards. We do, doctors meetings, those sorts of things to kind of connect each 12-step organization, group, fellowship with these places where people who are in need of help might come. And so it's important to remember that a lot of the legwork has already been done. All I got to do is show up. Heck, if I have a passion for some of these areas, what a beautiful opportunity to join some of those committees and be of service to your fellowship that you're a part of. You know what I'm saying? But in 1939, what I would have to do, and probably 1949, in those early days, what would I have to do? I'd have to go and make those connections. I'd have to go call doctors. I'd have to reach out to hospitals. I'd have to call churches to see if they knew anyone who was struggling. I would have to make those connections. And so in 2024, when a lot of the work has already been done for me, the least I could do is if there's a newcomer, go up to them. Do you know what I mean? I go up to them and we're called to make that approach, to approach them. And here's the key. Get their number. Don't just give them yours. I mean, because listen, I don't know anything about you, but when I got here, if you give me your number, I'm not calling that. You know what I'm not calling you. That's not happening. And I always like to make the joke, you might be asking me a question I don't know the answer to. Like, how are you doing? You know what I mean? It's like, not a trick question. I don't know, right? Like, so I'm not calling you. So I get their number so that I can reach out to them and see where they're at, see if they're open to sponsorship, see if they're open to working with somebody. And, it's before the meeting, we were talking about how I have these little stickers of the cycle. It's the cycle, I put it on the Zoom screen, but I made it into stickers. And it's a beautiful way to kind of break the ice, to talk with people who are new, to reach out and be like, hey, do you have one of these stickers? And to start that conversation. Are you new to AA? Are you new to CA? Have you been here before? Do you have a sponsor? Are you connected? What can I do to help you? Getting that information. And, it's if we're on Zoom, again, sometimes they're like, if you're able to sponsor, put your name and number in the chat. Absolutely do that. Some people, we got our numbers on our little Zoom name thingies. I can't remember. I'm like, I don't know how this works, but the name thingies, we got our numbers there. And like, that's wonderful. But I have never had anyone call me from put my number on the name doohickey. I also have a degree that's in technology. Like, I have a bachelor's of science in network communication management. So that should also scare you that like my education is in computers. And I'm like, the name doohickey, the thingamabob, science. You can tell I use that degree. But the least that I can do, especially in 2024, is if you're in those meetings where like, hey, if you're new, raise your hand. The least that I can do is send them a message. It can be a private message that's like, hey, here's my number. If you feel comfortable, please share yours with me. If you need a sponsor, any help with navigating any of this, let me know. There's no harm in that. Just an interesting, we talk about like 12-step work and just the interesting ways in which we can find new people. A way that I have found kind of helpful, I haven't gotten too many like very successful prospects, but I found some new people, is to join Facebook groups that are like kind of 12-step based. And there are people that'll put in the Facebook group, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I don't know what to do, reaching out to them. So, I mean, I don't think Bill Wilson, when he was writing this, was like, yeah, put it on Facebook. use Facebook. That wasn't a thing, but like that's the idea. I've kind of got to hustle this. I'm not sitting here on this like throne of recovery. Look at me, I am sober. Approach, and we shall discuss. No, my job is to help you. I gotta hustle you. Let's reach out to you, help you. That's the model. That's the idea. And so it says reaching out to doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. It says they will be only too glad to assist you. Don't start out as an evangelist or reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. Now, I won't put that statement into context. So we'll read that and it's like, okay. And I have this joke with my sponsor. If you guys remember the movie The Incredibles, and there was Edna Mode, the little superhero designer, costume designer, and she has that saying, "No capes." That's a reminder for me. No capes. You know what I mean? I am not there to be like, here I am to save the day. You know what I mean? So it's not showing up. I will rescue you. That's as I must be reformed. No, and so there's an element of that is true, but the true context of those lines in that paragraph is at that time in the United States, they had just repealed the 18th Amendment within recent history. That was only a couple of years prior. And the 18th Amendment is what made the sale of alcohol illegal. So it being repealed made the sale of alcohol legal again. And we know when governments change policies, everybody's great with that, and there's no further argument at all, And so it was the idea of should alcohol be legal or illegal was actually a really contentious topic. And so that's what it's talking about with, unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. And we're going to see that theme of like, hey, post-prohibition United States, there are some difficult sort of political things to navigate. And we'll see that through the chapter Working with Others, which is just, I'm sure you guys were excited for that fun historical fact, but you're getting it anyways. Yeah. All right. So it says, unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish, but it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. I am uniquely useful, and it's not because I was a math tutor. It's not because I have that degree, which clearly I don't use. It is how I am uniquely useful is my experience. That is what makes me uniquely useful. Of course, my experience with this illness, because there's something incredibly disarming, like what I was saying. Yes, I drank the way that you drank, or I used the way that you used. I felt the way that you felt. I experienced what you experienced, and I found a way out. I've been there too, but also my experience with the solution. And I talk a lot about my experience with these 12 steps because it does no good if I'm telling you, you go write inventory. I don't know how to write inventory. I want to be adept at inventory so I can help you. You know what I'm saying? And so, but really, like, as a fall down, failure of a drunk, pissing my pants behind a dumpster, smoking crack, pinkies up because I'm a lady, that experience has allowed me to be of use. And when we get to the chapter, the family afterward, we're going to see how that happened. Spoilers, how that happened is the 12 steps that produce that spiritual awakening. It converted those defects into assets. So it says, so cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. And I love that. We see this in the later chapters. No capes. I'm not going to put on my cape. I'm not going to save the world. I mean, I do try. A little bit of codependency, if you're wondering the defect at play. Codependency. Here I am to codepend. But to be helpful, to be useful. That's what I'm here to do. Helpful, useful. And we're going to see that as a theme. So when you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. So we've gone to meetings, we've maybe found somebody who's struggling on Facebook. Maybe we, reached out to a newcomer. We have a potential sponsee, somebody we can work with. Here's the first sort of direction where it says, find out all you can about him. We want to get information about this person. We're going to see very specifically, what are we looking for in terms of this information? Now, this is important. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. So if there is somebody that has been reaching out for help, somebody that, or like I reach out to at a meeting and they're like, I want to stop drinking. Okay, but cool. You don't have to. Listen, I got no tips on moderation because none of that worked for me. So you let me know, like, you do you, right? But I also go through this lens of if I'm reaching out, got a prospective sponsee, if I got a sponsee that doesn't want to do the steps, okay, I can't help you because that's all I got to offer. I've got these 12 steps out of this book and my experience with that to produce a spiritual awakening. That's what I got. So if somebody's not interested, that's okay. I don't have to convince them. In fact, I can't convince them. We're going to see in these later chapters that negging is not a successful approach to getting anyone to do anything. And if you're wondering, I have not been negged into any successful permanent or even semi-permanent change. And I'm sure I am the only one in this Zoom room that can relate to the idea of you tell me what to do, I'm gonna do the opposite. I think I've shared this story before, but it was right after I got sick, probably year 2 of sobriety, and I was struggling. I was in a lot of pain. I was in a lot of self-pity. And somebody said, Paige, you have to do a gratitude list. Well, I didn't do one for years, just to spite that guy. It showed him I wasn't very grateful, you know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of like, man, that's the sort of I can't make anyone do anything. Trying to force somebody to do it just doesn't work. Yeah, that exactly. Those are examples of frothy appeal. It doesn't work. So if they don't want to do it, that's cool. But I get to be transparent about what I have to offer. If you change your mind, if you ever want to go through this work, I am here to help you. So, and again, spoiled, like the more we push somebody to do something, the more it's like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they are dealing with a sick person. Again, somebody who is in pain, is suffering, is unwell. And that is the mindset. Not bad, not wrong, not just weak, but ill. So if there is any indication he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. Now, this is if we're, calling doctors, hospitals to get a hold of them. In 2024, I usually am not meeting people through their spouses or their family, by and large. In 2024, I'm usually just meeting them at a meeting, typically. Which isn't to say I haven't met people through people, but typically we kind of meet them at a meeting. So, but the idea behind this paragraph still holds true. So it says, if there's any indication he wants to stop, have a talk with the person most interested in him, usually it is his wife. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his backgrounds, the seriousness of his condition and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. And the thrust of what we're doing there, we're trying to get as much information. We're trying to seek to understand rather than to be understood. And so before I, get into the work with somebody, it can be helpful to have what I call the introductory coffee. I don't typically meet too many people in person these days, so it's more of a virtual coffee. It's virtual call. You don't have to, I can't drink coffee anymore, and that is not fun. But we have that sort of introductory conversation. What that looks like is asking, have you been to 12-step before? If so, what did that look like? Are you coming to 12-step for the first time? Have you been in and out for a long time? Have you had a sponsor before? What work have you done in the steps before? Have you been to treatment? What's sort of bringing you here? I can find somebody in one fellowship and realize they might be a better fit in another. You know what I mean? What is the substance or the compulsive behavior that's bringing you to talking with me? Like, what's going on? To get an understand a little bit, like, hey, what does this look like? Having a look for their allergy. What does that look like? Having a look for the obsession. Asking them some of that outside stuff. Is there outside stuff that might be helpful to know? Do you have a diagnosed mental health condition and are on medication for it? That can just be helpful information, because if they do a med change and I'm like, hey, they seem a little off, we can talk about, oh, that's why. You know what I mean? I'm not telling people what to do with their medication, but asking those questions, and asking, hey, were they maybe about that whole higher power idea? How open are you to that? How closed are you? Seeking to get that information. And in that process, I also talk about how I work with people and sort of what sponsorship looks like, because not everybody knows. A lot of times it's like people aren't looking for like a sponsor. They aren't looking for somebody to take them through the steps. God bless, I get why. Those don't look appealing before I've done them. They're amazing as I go and do, but like, oh, I don't want to do those. They want like sober buddy. I just want to call you when I'm having a hard time. Like, oh, that's not me. If you want to call me when you're having a hard time, heck yeah, but we're going to be doing some inventory. That's what we're doing, which is repellent to certain people who are like, I don't want to do that. Fair enough. I get it. You don't have to, but this is what I have to offer. And so that can be really just helpful to have those conversations. What does their schedule look like in terms of work and family? Like, is that going to line up with like my schedule? Are we going to have time to do this work? Because some of you guys know I go hard. I like to work with sponsees 2 hours a day, going so I can go through the work. And I like going line by line. There's times we can't go line by line, but I like going line by line so we can go 2 hours at least a day to go quickly and thoroughly through this work so they are recovered and feeling able to help others. They might not be able to do that. I work with people in very different time zones, and maybe they're like, hey, I'd like to meet you at a time that is 8 a.m. I'm not available. That is not a good fit. Listen, and I want you to know, you also don't want me at 8 a.m. Like you're not gonna get your best page. No. So getting that information, getting as much information as we can to see how we can be helpful. And it's one of those things where I talked about just now about I like to go line by line. Taking them through line by line. And the reason I do is because I feel like when I take people through in that way, they're more comfortable in sponsoring others. And I feel for me, my responsibility in sponsoring others is to sponsor them in such a way that they are more than able to sponsor others. That's my responsibility. And I found line by line to be really effective in that, because if they have to be a little bit more flexible and go a little bit faster and do it a bit of a different way, they're more comfortable with mirroring their experience with what's in the book. But in that conversation, if they're telling me what their last few relapses have looked like, I get a sense about whether or not, listen, if you can't make it a week, we maybe have to work a lot faster than that. And we need to be getting you like pretty much done your 4-step by that first week. You know what I'm saying? We've got to go. And we can do line by line after. So it's getting that information to see how I can be most helpful, how I can set them up for success. And so that's, and I love that spiritual idea of seeking to understand rather than to be understood. Which again, I explain how I sponsor, I explain what it looks like, and they get to decide. It's always consensual. So sometimes it is wise to wait until he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk it. And it's like, hold on, why would I wait till this guy goes on a binge? So what in this context, so we've met them through the family, and what we're doing is we're waiting until there's a moment of willingness. For those that know, I'm not big on bottoms as like, oh, I got to hit my rock bottom, because anyone here hit a rock bottom and then relapsed after that? You know what I mean? So what I find is what happens is I drink or I use myself into this place where there is so much pain, and I'm willing to take actions that I wasn't willing to take before. And so when it's saying it's wise to wait until he goes on to a binge, we're waiting till this person has burned it down so they're willing. They got that window of willingness. They got that little bit of desperation where they might be open to the solution. Now, again, if there's somebody who's asked me for help in a meeting, I don't have to be like, okay, let's wait till you go in a, no, like we can work with them now. You know what I'm saying? But I just put in the context. So sometimes it's wise to wait until he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it is better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk, unless he's ugly and the family needs your help. And if people reach out to me, if they're drinking, especially or using, and they're very intoxicated, I don't have anything to offer other than I can help you get a right to detox. I can help you figure that out. But listen, I can't talk to you because you're not even going to remember any of the things I said. You know what I mean? If there's a brief period of lucidity, I can work within that. But again, the conversation is like, we got to get you going. You know what I mean? So wait for the end of the spree, or at least a lucid interval. Then let his family or a friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. Now, we don't have to find their spouse and ask their spouse or the brother-in-law to go ask them. We can just ask them, do you want to quit drinking for good or using for good or acting out on this compulsive behavior for good? And are you willing to go to any lengths? We can ask them that. And you guys will, will see that this was a question that was asked to Fred on page bottom of 42. That question was asked to us on page 58. We're seeing that on page 90. We're going to see that again on page 112. And goodness gracious, we're going to see it in two employers on page 142. So this theme of asking, hey, do you want what we have, permanent contented sobriety? And are you willing to do whatever it takes to get it? If so, awesome, great. If not, cool. Like that, I mean, that's transparent. You don't have to, great. So if he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. And again, there is that word, recovered. Recovered does not mean cured, but what recovered means is the mental obsession has been relieved as the result of the 12 steps. We see that happen in those step 10 promises, recovered. That's what I need, recovered. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, try to help others and who will be glad to talk if he cares to see you. That idea of like, hey, I'm doing this so I get to stay sober. If you want to go, more than happy to help you. I'm not going to micromanage your life. Let's go, And it says, if he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. We got to let people decide for themselves if they want to do this. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. Again, waiting for that moment of willingness where that pain is enough that they might be willing to try another way. We talk about that cycles. We go through that cycle and we emerge remorseful. And that pain, that remorse, that regret, that I'm such a piece of garbage. I hate who I am. I hate what I've done. That leads me to say, that's it. I'm never going to do it again. And in that moment, between that pain and that swearing off is where we can act. You know what I mean? That's where like, heck yeah, we can move in that because that's that window of willingness. So you might place this book where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious, for that might spoil matters. Usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. And again, page 18, we don't necessarily have to go there, but page 18, it talks about how doctors, psychiatrists, I'm not super open. Do you know doctors and psychiatrists, when they ask about, like, they suspect you of like alcoholism or addiction, and they ask how much you've been drinking or using, they know we lie. I don't know who told them. I didn't tell them, but they know we lie. And they have a thing, they're like, at least double it, if not triple it. And I'm like, oh, who told them? We're not honest with them. I got my walls, I got my mask, but when it comes to family, oh, You can't get near me with a 10-foot pole. You know what I mean? I got the walls up, I got the hackles up. So it's saying like, hey, approaching through the family might be tough because we are not open to family suggestions. So approaching through a doctor, a psychiatrist, or an institution of another sort. But again, in 2024, I'm going to approach them probably directly, either in person or in a Zoom meeting or however. Approach through a doctor. Yeah, hold on. Sorry, I just realized I'm not. There's been an update and I haven't seen the chat things come up, and I'm like, oh no, I'm missing things. Yeah, and so what we're talking about is that idea of like, okay, I'm not going to force myself on them, and they get to make their own decision, and I get to show up and just be honest. All right, it says when your man is better, which is, oh, sorry, usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he is violent. And so nowadays, we can't necessarily force people to, we definitely can't force people to go to detox or to do that sort of thing. But that idea of they might need hospitalization or detox, that is a theme or an idea that we picked up in the doctor's opinion. And in the doctor's opinion, what we see is that idea that like, hey, if we can get his mind thoroughly clear, like detox, they might need detox to get that like truly to get that alcohol, drugs, whatever it is out of their system, so that they're able to like fully accept this way of life. It's hard when I still have the allergy acting upon me. Does that make sense? If I've still got the allergy, it's hard, like in action. So the detox is to separate me from the alcohol, from the drugs, from the substances. So yeah, sometimes when somebody's drinking or using and they're calling me, it's like, man, I can get you to detox, because if you can't get a couple days sober or a day or two sober on your own, and again, if we're detoxing off of alcohol, that can be incredibly dangerous. So I'm just throwing that out there. Absolutely not a doctor, although I did write my own prescriptions for a while there. And so with respect to that, like, yeah, it can be dangerous. So it can always, with alcohol withdrawals, it can be important to seek medical attention if needed. So when your man is better, which is not to say that means detoxed, not like we went to detox and we're solved. Nope, sobriety is not a solution to this illness. The solution is the spiritual awakening. In fact, you throw me into sobriety, it's not good. I approach the second part of my problem, which is the mental obsession. Sobriety, not a solution. Yeah. So when your man is better, detox, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, I haven't, leave them out of the first discussion. Under these conditions, your prospect will see he is under no pressure. He will feel he can deal with you without being nagged by his family. So again, I'm not here to pressure. I'm not here to force. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But this is all I got to offer. And it says, call on him when he is still jittery. He may be more receptive when depressed, in that place of hopelessness. You see, that's one of the things we talk a lot about in this book, the place of hopelessness. I need to get to that realization of my hopelessness before I'm really able to grab a hold of the hope that's on offer. You know what I'm saying? I got to get to the hopeless to the hope. And man, it is when I've burnt my life to the ground. It is when I'm hurting and in pain and filled with that remorse and regret that I'm willing. I got that window of willingness open. I'll take some actions that I wasn't willing to take before. So it says, and so now this is how we make that sort of first approach. It says, see your man alone if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. So this, I mean, listen, if you guys are wondering, this is where war stories can be helpful. So if I'm sharing, this is what the allergy looked like for me, this is what the obsession looks like for me, and then they start matching it, we can start matching stories so that they're able to better identify and relate and do that sort of thing. So if he wishes to talk, let him do so. You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit. So really explaining those examples of where I went through the cycle where I said, I'm never going to do it again. Man, I got to do it again. You know what I'm saying? Like I'd say, I'm never going to do it again. A day, a week, a month later, I got a drink in hand and I'm doing it again. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, if you're looking please stick around after the meeting. I'll get you connected with somebody who can take you through the book, absolutely, and take you through the work. Don't I can't do it right now because clearly we know I don't multitask very well, but stick around, we'll get you connected with somebody. All right. Some of you are like, yes, Paige, we know. You're off on your tangent of tangent, off the tangent, left of the tangent. You know what I mean? Tangent. Focus. All right. So, if he's not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the moment you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. What I'm going to point out is they might not know quite how it was accomplished, but we did meet them in the rooms, so they might have a little bit idea already. So it's not a grand mystery, but what it's trying to do is trying to help them see the hopelessness before grabbing a hold. So if he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. So what we're doing now is we're meeting them where they're at. You know what I mean? I'm like matching. When I say matching their energy, I don't mean it in an argumentative way. What I mean is like if somebody's in pain, being like, yeah, I hear you. I went through that too, and sharing those stories. But if they're like laughing and joking, let's laugh and joke, matching their energy. That's what I mean. So when he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him account of the struggles you made to stop. So what we're saying is share with them the examples of the alcoholic cycle or the addict cycle where I said, I'm never going to do it again. And I'm thrust into abstinence. A day, a week, a month or so later, I get a thought that happens in my mind. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. F it, I'm going to get drunk. And I take that first drink, take that first drug, take that compulsive act, and off I go. I get that ease and comfort, and the phenomenon of craving develops. I go through the spree. Share my examples with that. We show him the mental twist. Now make a note, that is the mental obsession, which leads to the first drink of the spree. Because that's really what we want to emphasize with people that are new. Most of us, and maybe not, but most of us are able to understand conceptually the allergy pretty quickly. Understanding, yeah, that's right. Once I start to drink, or use or whatever, I can't control the amount that I take. I start and there's something in me that sets off and I need more. How often do we hear, yes, I know I can never, ever do it again. But a lot of times the part that we miss is but I will do it again. I will drink again. I will use again. And what is the will, the thing that I will drink again? What that is the mental obsession. That insane thought that I have when I am sober. It is a thought that I have when I am sober, but my illness is untreated with the spiritual awakening as the result of the 12 steps. That sober thought that tells me I can drink again. That is the mental twist. That is what we're talking about. And that leads to the hopelessness. And we got to emphasize that. We spent a whole chapter, more about alcoholism, laser beaming in on it. We spent a lot of time with it too, and there's a solution. We saw Bill describe it as well. That focusing on that is so helpful and so important when we're working with people who do not know why it's like, I don't know why I keep going out. I don't want to drink. I'm a chronic relapse. I don't know why. It is the mental obsession. And when that clicks, that helps us to see why. It's not because I'm bad. It's not because I'm wrong. It's not because I'm weak moral character, it's because I have this illness. I have this mental obsession. But also, it then kind of gives us a sense of impetus, a sense of urgency, knowing that a relapse is inevitable for somebody like me. If I do not do this work, I will relapse. Kind of lights a fire under my butt. This is clearly what I got to do. I don't got time to wait. There's no time to lollygag. I sometimes use language that is not 2024 language. There's no time to shenanigan nor lollygag. No, we cannot tomfoolery. We need to focus, work the steps, So we suggest that you do this as we have done it on the chapter on alcoholism. If he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your own mental inconsistencies, the examples of the mental obsession with some of his own. That's what we're talking about. It goes on to say, if you are satisfied, he is a real alcoholic. How do I know if somebody's a real alcoholic? Page 44, first paragraph. Lack of control, lack of choice. That I can't control the amount I take once I start to drink. And when I want to stay sober, I can't. When I've said I'm never going to drink again, I drink again. Or I'm never going to smoke crack again. I smoke crack again. You know what I mean? That's what we're talking about. So if you are satisfied he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental conditioning surrounding that first drink. Again, we're talking about the mental obsession, the insane thought that I have before I take that first drink. That thing that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. My problem was I was hanging out with people in Ohio, but I'm drinking with Canadians. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So show how the queer mental conditioning surrounding that first drink prevents the normal functioning of the willpower. We're laying in that like willpower cannot keep me sober. My desire to stay sober cannot keep me sober. Willpower does not keep me sober. The fear cannot keep me sober. Human power cannot keep me sober. Really trying to emphasize that. And it says, don't at this stage refer to this book unless you've seen it. I'll be honest, if you're asking me for help, you've probably seen it. I'm a little heavy on this thing, a little heavy. It's not like, surprise, it's there, so they've probably seen it. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he's seen it and wishes to discuss it. I'm always like, but I want to discuss it. It's book. So it says, and be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusions. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can if he's not too alcoholic, but insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. And so what we're talking about is that idea of like, have your own experience. My job is to let people have the dignity of their own experience. But I do need to give them the information. So if somebody's like, no, I think I can do it my way. I think I can control my drinking, or I think, I can, just smoke crack on weekends, or I think, I don't need to do all the steps, or that sort of thing. Okay, but, and this is the thing, is I give them the information that they need. But if you have this illness, it's not going to work. I mean, we can say it a little more nuanced than that. We don't have to like, so we can say it with a little bit of decorum. I'm not known for that. And so we're going to stop in the middle part of this next paragraph, which is a weird place to stop. But when we meet next week, we're going to probably start from the start of the paragraph, but just bear with me with this, because there's a transition, because what we're doing right now is laying the foundation of step one. Another way to say it is that we are laying down the foundation of what our problem is. The physical allergy, the mental obsession. That's what we're doing. So it says, continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness a fatal malady. So speak about the fatality, that if I have this thing, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm going to die. Talk about the conditions of body, physical allergy, and mind, mental obsession, which accompany it. And keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Because alcoholics, we like to argue. We like to find fault with things, and we like to argue about anything. You know what you can't argue with? My experience and what's in this book. We can say we don't like it because that wasn't mine, but we can't argue. We can't say, girl, that didn't happen, because that's a little gaslighting. So I'm letting you know, it's a little gas, and you're like, girl, that didn't happen. Like, it did. So explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doomed is another word that means hopeless, that many are hopeless who do not realize what is wrong with them. And it says doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. So they're like, hey, we don't always want to be super honest with them because that's a real bummer. And then in the 1930s, doctors weren't always honest with their patients about a lot of things. Like there was that sort of like, oh, we don't want to bum them out. So that was kind of the medical approach at that time. Don't bum out the patients. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. Why? And man, we're not going to grab a hold of the solution if I don't understand the problem. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, the traits of the alcoholic: physical allergy, mental obsession. That's it. If his own doctor is willing to tell him he is an alcoholic, so much the better. And that's a weird place to leave off, but that's where we're going to transition into laying down the solution and the program of action. So I'll stop the recording and we'll leave it right there. And thank you guys for being here with me today.